Chapter 156. The Inquisition 5. I won't accept your intention to resign, Klein, the newly appointed head of the council, made clear from the very beginning. Gilead didn't respond to these words immediately and just pursed his lips. The two were currently sitting at the round table within the Black Lion Castle. I know what you must be thinking, and I also know that you're feeling guilty. However, the Lionheart clan will be thrown into even greater chaos if you decide to take responsibility for this incident by resigning from your office. Klein continued speaking without losing momentum. If you abdicate from your seat as the patriarch, just who in the world do you think we can turn to as our next patriarch? Guion, who has joined the Black Lions? Or Guilford, who has already left to form his own collateral line? If that happens, then what should we do with your wife and children? Hesitantly, Gilead attempted to reply, It would all be tough to deal with, Klein pressed onwards. Having abdicated from your position as the patriarch, should we allow you to remain as part of the main family? Or else should we send you out to start a new collateral line? And what should we do with the next patriarch? No matter how you think about it, it would all be far from easy to handle and lead to an utter mess. As such, I order you to put up with your shame and humiliation and just keep sitting in the seat as the patriarch. Eugene had also been invited to sit at the round table with them. As he listened to Klein speak, Eugene nodded inwardly to himself. If Gilead steps down from his position as the patriarch at this point, Ancilla's eyes are sure to roll up to the back of her head. Ancilla's personality had become more amiable because her position in the main family had been strengthened, and Cyan had been confirmed as the next patriarch. But what if they were forced to leave the main family at this point, or questions about who the next patriarch should truly be arise? It was all but a certainty that Ancilla would run wild. Gilead hesitantly tried to argue, however. This incident occurred due to my inadequacies as a father. Since I have harmed the clan due to my shortcomings, I should take responsibility for it. The responsibility for this is not yours alone, but the Lionheart clans as a whole, Klein growled out as he waved off Gilead's confession. This problem wasn't caused by your son Ued Lionheart alone. Instead, it was an eruption of a problem that has long festered at the heart of the Lionheart clan. Gilead silently acknowledged this truth. The deceased former council head has left behind a will that lays out this matter clearly. As the new council head and a longtime senior of the Lionheart clan, I will do everything I can to ensure that the family does not experience a problem like this in the future, Klein sincerely vowed. He left behind a will? Gilead asked hesitantly. Klein coughed in response and stood up to read out the will. The following talk between the two men followed along the lines of the topics that Eugene had brought up with Doynes. There was to be a massive expansion in the recruitment and training for the Black Lions and an abolishment of the bloodline continuation ceremony so that from this year onwards, all collateral branches would have the same freedom to train their mana and swordsmanship that the main family did. The White Flame formula will still remain in the main family's possession, but the abolishment of the bloodline continuation ceremony should convince all the collateral lines that change truly has come to the Lionheart clan, Klein concluded. Was all that really in the former council head's will? Gilead asked doubtfully. Are you surprised by this? So was I. However, he truly did leave such a will before he finally rested his eyes. Klein then let out a long sigh and sat down. Although it's sudden, and honestly hard to accept, the elders including myself have decided to validate his will. This latest situation was triggered by the dissatisfaction of the collateral bloodlines, which accumulated due to the stale tradition of the bloodline continuation ceremony, so it is time to admit that it has rotted us from within. Gilead hesitated, unable to figure out what to say. The fact that the bloodline continuation ceremony wasn't a well-thought-out tradition was something that Gilead had already felt for some time now. However, the tradition wasn't something that could easily be corrected, even when everyone knew that there was something wrong with it. The Lionheart clan, it really is changing, Gilead realized with some shock. It has to change, Klein agreed with a deep sigh. We should have changed before now. No, that wouldn't have been possible. If we hadn't experienced this kind of pain, then we would never have even thought of changing. I also believe that increasing the Black Lion's strength is a necessity, Gilead eventually said, having pushed down his turbulent emotions. It's a bit late to inform you of this, but the Emperor of Kiel has said that, in order to prepare for Helmuth's schemes, he wants to promote unity between the knightly orders from each country. Unity. Klein repeated. The other elders who had gathered here today also began showing interest in Gilead's words. Gilead coughed as he felt all of their gazes focus on him and then continued to speak. Yes. All of Kiel's allies will be invited to a conference, including whichever of the smaller countries that wish to participate. It hasn't been fully confirmed yet, but it seems that any mercenary corp of similar size to a knightly order may also be allowed to participate. I see, Klein muttered as his brow furrowed. For him to invite the knights and mercenaries from other countries, it seems that the emperor wants to hold a contest of strength in the name of unity. There were several famous knightly orders on this continent. The likes of Blood Cross Knights of the Holy Empire of Uras, the Sea Kingdom Shimuan Storm Knights, the White Dragon Knights of the Kiel Empire, the Ruhr Kingdom's White Fangs, Nahama's Sand Scorpions, and the Lionheart Clan's Knights of the Black Lion and Knights of the White Lion. But which one among all of them was the strongest knightly order? Such a question couldn't be answered hastily. Of course, the Emperor of Kiel had always believed that his White Dragon Knights were the best, but before now he lacked the opportunity to prove so. Gilead explained, through this unity conference, each of the knightly orders will have the opportunity to cross arms to promote camaraderie. If all of the empires and kingdoms gather their forces to one location, then even the demon kings of Helmuth may begin to feel a little nervous, Klein said optimistically. Gilead just laughed. Even though the demon king of incarceration has shown no reaction to having the anti-demon alliance and the Blood Cross Knights stationed at the borders of Helmuth? Changing the subject, Klein asked, did the emperor tell you where he plans to hold the unity conference? Of course he's planning on holding it within the borders of Kiel, Gilead answered, though his brows furrowed in skepticism. There's no way that will happen. Klein clicked his tongue as he shook his head in disappointment at the emperor's naivety. After all, this incident is bigger than Kiel now, isn't it? So the only possibility is, it has to be Ruhr. That's what I've concluded as well, Gilead agreed. While listening to the conversation between the elders and the patriarch, Eugene kept his mouth shut. However, he could no longer contain his curiosity at this news, so he looked over to Genos, standing behind Klein, and met his gaze. Genos coughed. Ahem. The reason why Ruhr is highly likely to be the site of the Unity Conference should be the strong aura of legitimacy that the Ruhr's royal family holds. Legitimacy? Eugene repeated questioningly. Genos replied, the royal family of Ruhr are the direct descendants of the brave Molen. Of course, we Lionhearts are also the descendants of the great Vermouth, and Lady Sienna's disciples can be found in Arath, but the biggest reason should be that only 100 years ago, Sir Molen was spotted on the founding anniversary of the Ruhr Kingdom, right? Gilead picked up where Genos had left off. After that he disappeared again, but Sir Molen's death has yet to be revealed to the world. The royal family of Ruhr will only say that Sir Molen's current whereabouts are hidden. Aha, so you're saying everyone is hoping Sir Molen will make an appearance at the Unity Conference? Eugene said as his eyes shone in excitement, and he nodded in understanding. That should be the biggest reason for it, Gilead confirmed. Considering that the Demon King of Incarceration has given us that warning in this current era, you never know when Helmuth might reveal its despicable intentions. In such turbulent times, if a hero who personally faced the Demon Kings 300 years ago were to add his support. Ahem, Genos coughed awkwardly. Gilead turned to Genos in concern. Lord Genos? Is something the matter? Are you feeling uncomfortable? Ahem, it's nothing. I suddenly got something stuck in my throat. Ahem. Sometimes I just get these uncontrollable coughs. Genos weakly tried to excuse himself. But the moment Eugene glared piercingly at Genos, he quickly regained control of his breath. When will the Unity Conference be held? Klein asked. Since His Majesty is showing great enthusiasm for the idea, we will probably receive the news within the year, Gilead revealed. Klein sighed. How blatant. Since this incident has also taken place, it seems that he plans to make public the fact that the situation of the Lionheart clan isn't what it used to be. Well, it's not unusual behavior for them, is it? Throughout the years, the successive emperors of Kiel have always wanted to prove that their White Dragon Knights are superior to the Black Lions and the White Lions. They've always wanted to take possession of the strength of the Lionheart clan for themselves, Gilead said with some resignation. It seems we'll be forced to show them quite a pathetic and shameful appearance. With the immortal White Lion dead and his successor Dominic unable to properly finish the sentence, the new council head let out a deep sigh. The destruction of the demon's spear and the annihilation hammer will also greatly impact our prestige. However, Lady Carmen is still here, isn't she? There's also Lord Genos, and as for the strength of the Knights of the Black Lion, Gilead hesitated, unsure how to finish. Genos pessimistically assessed, it would be fair to say that the strength of the Black Lions has fallen by half compared to our heyday. That might not necessarily be the case, Klein argued as he patted his knees and raised his head. Don't we have the person responsible for destroying the demon's spear and the annihilation hammer here with us? All the elders' eyes turned to Eugene. Eugene blinked calmly, then he scratched his cheek and nodded. I'll do the best I can, he promised them. Perhaps because he had already refused them before, none of them asked him to join the Knights of the Black Lion once more. If that Unity Conference is going to be held in Roer, that works out well for me, Eugene thought. It was a place he still needed to visit at some point, but since it was so far away it was a bit of a hassle for him to go there alone. But if Molen was still alive, then just like everyone was hoping for, he would definitely make an appearance at the Unity Conference. Unless his personality has changed significantly in the past 300 years, that is, Eugene considered cautiously. Since the old days, Molen always enjoyed feasting and competing with others. If a large number of knights and other powerful warriors from foreign countries gathered together in the middle of his kingdom, Molen was sure to make an appearance, even if it was just to prove that he was still the strongest and most skilled warrior. If he's still alive, Eugene silently sighed. Eugene recalled Molen and his poor grasp of the common language. Even after wandering together for over 10 years, Molen's rough way of speaking had never shown any improvement. He was simple and honest, and even though he had skillful techniques rather than displaying them, he preferred to challenge his foes from the front, confronting them in terms of strength rather than skill. No matter the situation or what manner of foe they had encountered, Molen had always been the first to charge forward. Whenever the battle ended with him being the first to get injured, Molen would promise them each time that he would make sure to look ahead and think before he jumped into action next time. They had all trusted him, and that faith had never once been shaken. If it was Molen, he would be able to endure it. With Molen they could break through this. If Molen was with them they would be fine. Though Molen wasn't the only one to whom such trust was directed. Hamel, Sienna, Molen, Anise and Vermouth, all 5 of them had trusted in each other. Because of their unconditional trust in each other, they were able to advance through Helmuth's terrible gloom. They had never betrayed each other, never fled alone. And it was because they all believed that they shared the same determination to fight that they were able to confront the demon kings without doubting each other. Molen, Eugene thought wistfully as he pondered his complex mix of emotions. Although it had been so long since they had last seen each other, Eugene could still clearly recall Molen's appearance and voice as if they had just met. It wasn't just Molen but Sienna, Anise and Vermouth as well. Eugene could still vividly remember how they had all fought together, carrying the same goals and guarding each other's backs. I just can't imagine the sight of you looking old or weak. While recalling the appearance of his old friend, Eugene clenched his fists tightly. The day after their meeting had ended, Eugene came out to the warp gate in front of Black Lion Castle. Since there was no reason to continue staying in Black Lion Castle any longer, he was here to make an early return to the main estate. He had heard that the inquisitors from the Holy Empire had returned earlier that morning. They hadn't asked anyone to see them off, and unlike when they had arrived, they quietly left the castle. I should have asked them to pass on my greetings to Christina, Eugene thought regretfully for a few moments, but then he realized there was no need to say something so pointless. Atterix was good at subtly getting on people's nerves, and Himoria had openly ground her sharp, bestial teeth at them. No matter how Eugene thought about it, neither of them seemed cordial enough to do Eugene such a favor. It looks like I'll have to stay here at the castle until the end of the month, Gilead spoke up with a wry smile. We need to ensure that this incident is dealt with properly, and I also need to visit the grave of the deceased former council head. It wasn't just Doine's grave either. Uad had massacred all of Count Bosser's household, including Tanis. Their funerals had already been arranged, and another lord had been appointed to inherit Count Bosser's fief. Klein and the other elders had already bowed their heads in apology to appease Bosser's enraged relatives. But separate from them, Gilead also needed to offer his apologies. Or at least that's how Gilead felt. So he first needed to visit the Bossar clan's graveyard, and once that was dealt with, he also needed to visit the family of the deceased deacon who had been used as a sacrifice. And after that, he needed to announce the abolishment of the bloodline continuation ceremony while also dealing with the influential figures from the collateral bloodlines who would be sure to visit Black Lion Castle. Usually, any such meetings would be held at the main estate, but with the announcement of the abolition of the age-old tradition and the other changes occurring to the Lionheart clan's long-standing traditions, it was only natural that these meetings would be held at Black Lion Castle, where the elders would make themselves available. "I don't think you'll be able to return before the month is over," Eugene opined. "I also feel the same way," Gilead agreed with a nod as he continued to smile bitterly. "I won't be able to return until next month at the very latest. Since Cyan has said that he will remain in this castle with me and continue his training until it's time. I'll leave the main estate in your hands until my return. Lady Ancilla and Lady Carmen will also be there," Eugene assured him. "You forgot to mention Gerhard," Gilead said in a reminder. Only for Eugene to scoff. "My father won't be of much help even if he is there." Upon hearing Eugene make such a joke, Gilead forced his sunken cheeks into an awkward smile. Seeing this reaction, Eugene felt there hadn't been any point in making such a joke. The forced smile of a sick man, who looked as though he might collapse at any time, just looked pitiful. "Seal will also return to the main estate soon, won't she?" Eugene said as he turned to look behind Gilead, only for Seal Lionheart to poke her head out from behind a wall of the castle and roll her eyes at Eugene. "I'm only going back so I can continue learning from Lady Carmen," Seal insisted. "Who even questioned that?" Eugene simply responded. "I'm free to return to my home whenever I like. Like I said, who even questioned that?" Seal's tone was a bit petulant. Part of her wanted to tell him to wait a few more days so they could return together, but Seal couldn't. She had decided to stay at Black Lion Castle for a little longer because she was worried about the suffering her father was going through. Since Gilead would also likely require an assistant, Seal was thinking of accompanying Gilead on his visit to the Bossar family's graveyard and then to Deacon's family as well. "Make sure to tell Mother that my brother and I are in good health and we don't have any injuries," Seal reluctantly entreated. Eugene grunted in response before turning to look at Gilead. "If that's all, I'll see you when you return to the main estate, Uncle." As he saw Eugene approach him with his hand outstretched, Gilead gave a faint smile and said, "Thank you." Gilead accepted the handshake of his foster child with whom he shared not a drop of blood. It seemed like only yesterday when he had first adopted Eugene as his foster child, but the hand he was holding didn't have any traces of that former youth left on it. This made Gilead's heart ache even further. He could still clearly remember what his foster child's hand had felt like when they had first met, but he found that he couldn't clearly remember how his eldest son Euad's hands had felt. Overcome by guilt and remorse, Gilead closed his eyes. "Uncle," Seal thought, her lips protruding in a pout. It was obvious who Eugene was referring to by that title, but why was Gilead now, Uncle? The last time the two had met, she was sure that Eugene had paid attention to the line between them and had kept referring to her father as Sir Gilead. "Well, calling him Uncle isn't all that bad," Seal realized consideringly. "Call me Big Sis," Seal demanded. "Have you started drinking so early in the day?" Eugene asked. Seal argued, "Why won't you call me Big Sis when you can call my father your uncle?" "I don't know what that has to do with anything," Eugene muttered as he turned around. The warp gate had been connected since earlier, and Dyad, the captain of the 6th Division in charge of maintaining it, was sending him a hurrying look. "Try to stay out of trouble and give Uncle a shoulder massage when you have the time," Eugene advised her. "You're talking like an old man again," Seal sulked. Without saying anything further, Eugene headed into the warp gate. Once he returned to the main estate, the first thing that he would need to do would be to fully explain the situation to Ancilla and Carmen. After that, he would have to test out the demon's spear and the annihilation hammer in the forest where the elves now lived. And perhaps during that process he might just sneak into the estate's ley line for a bit. "They should forgive me for that much," Eugene mused. After he had finished his maintenance of the annihilation hammer and the demon's spear, Eugene would also need to start preparing. Iris, Eugene rolled the name around his head. It was about time for the Rakshasa princess to show up. Chapter 157. the capital. 1. Eugene was sitting upright in the center of the Lionheart's forest. The talkative mayor wasn't with him right now. The Lionheart family's second mistress, Ancilla, was affluential in the high society of the capital series. But many Lionheart knights didn't respect her as much as they respected their more conspicuous patriarch, Gilead. Still, she was well aware of what went on in high society and influenced the other members into making decisions in her favor even though she did not participate much in social parties. That was how she acquired the nickname, the Lioness of High Society. However, the Lionheart family's reputation was now in the gutter because of Ued. To continue her reign over the high society, there was a lot of stuff Ancilla had to do, such as personally writing letters to the nobles and even attending parties that she had rarely attended before. Since there were some lowlifes who spoke badly of the Lionhearts at banquets or tea parties, Ancilla had to blackmail them in the name of gifts. 1. She also had to warn and, if needed, threaten the press to keep them from publishing any articles or tabloids about the Lionhearts. To sum up, she was under a lot of stress. She usually had her own methods of relieving stress, like downing glasses of wine before going to bed or a good hard jog before dawn in her training suit until she was out of breath. These days, however, Ancilla had not needed any of her usual go-to stress-relieving tactics. Mare currently happened to be in the main estate, the very person with whom Ancilla could fulfill her fantasy and interact to get rid of regrets from her previous parenting. Ancilla realized that dressing, feeding, and adoring this little girl were just as effective, if not more, in relieving her stress. Therefore, Mare was with Ancilla right now. In fact, Eugene couldn't have let Mare stay by his side even if Ancilla hadn't wished to spend time with her. She might be negatively affected by this, Eugene thought. When Eugene saw the lightning flame for the first time, Melkith warned him that Mare's formula might get damaged while Eugene tried to make the lightning flame surrender. If Mare's control formula got damaged, it was impossible for the current Eugene to restore it. Eugene slightly changed his upright sitting position a couple of times as he got absorbed in his thoughts. After the World Tree's seedlings had been moved to the Lionheart's forest, they had rooted themselves in the ground and touched the ley line that was created by Vermouth hundreds of years ago. Only a month had passed since then, but this forest had become lively and was now green all year round, just like Tempest and Melkith had said. Although the number of fairy trees hadn't increased yet, and neither had the World Tree's seedlings gotten any bigger, Eugene could feel the same amount of World Tree's spirits as that of the Elven Sanctuary. They really don't listen to me, Eugene grumbled. He could only feel them, he still couldn't control the World Tree's spirit. Even though he had already tried when the lightning flame blended into his body for the first time, those spirits continued to not answer Eugene's calls. I never counted on it, though, Eugene thought as he scratched his head. He pulled out the Annihilation Hammer and the Demon Spear from the Cloak of Darkness. Despite the fact that they were used to fight the intense battle at Black Lion Castle, these two weapons were fortunately intact. There was not a single crack on them. When Eugene tightly grabbed the Demon Spear, it squirmed like bulging veins. It had a curvy blade similar to a sea wave and was longer and sharper than most blades. The Annihilation Hammer looked just like a giant hammer. The Demon Spear was too long and stood taller than Eugene, but the Annihilation Hammer matched Eugene's height. However, it was heavy. Rather than using this giant hammer as a weapon, it would be better for Eugene to smash boulders in a mine. In other words, the Annihilation Hammer and the Demon Spear were currently just weird-looking metal pieces. On top of that, these weapons were hard to handle. Eugene could only use these as a hammer and a spear. It was because their demonic energy and the Demon King's remnants had been completely obliterated by the Holy Sword and the Moonlight Sword. Eugene squinted in thought as he held the Demon Spear and the Annihilation Hammer in both hands. Regardless of their states, he could still use them as weapons. Even after thorough analysis, he wasn't sure what these weapons were made of, but he could infuse a lot of mana in them. However, that didn't mean much. He could also infuse a lot of mana in WNYD and Asphalt. While Eugene infused mana into Annihilation Hammer and the Demon Spear, he could see the part of his lightning flame and his mana seep into them. I can't analyze their spell formulas. Eugene did check their formulas through Akka. The Demon Spear and the Annihilation Hammer had formulas to recreate the Demon King's ability, but the formulas didn't exist separately. Rather than being engraved in the weapons, they were melted into them, becoming one with their respective weapons. Therefore, he couldn't modify or separate the formulas from the spear or the hammer. I cannot even understand these formulas, so it's not surprising. With ordinary mana, Eugene couldn't recreate the lost ability of the Demon's Spear and the Annihilation Hammer. Would it be different if he used demonic energy? Yes, it probably would, but Eugene would never try to control demonic energy unless he went nuts. Yet there was some good news. Eugene saw a possibility of recreating the ability of the Demon's Spear and the Annihilation Hammer. And the Demon's Spear and the Annihilation Hammer turned out to be excellent catalysts. Whoosh! The white flame. The white flame rose up from Eugene. Then, holding the Demon's Spear and the Annihilation Hammer in each hand, Eugene focused on connecting his cores and making them spin in a circle. When his cores began to spin, Eugene's flame became bigger and the lightning flames sparked around him. As if they were answering to the ring flame formula, the Demon's Spear and the Annihilation Hammer howled. Eugene glared at the two weapons, feeling his stinging skin. The weapons weren't taking away Eugene's mana. Instead, Eugene was practically shoving his mana into them. Eugene's current mana was immense and pure, and no one would believe that he had only trained for 7 years. He was shoving that mana into the weapons to the point of scraping the bottom of his mana barrel. Wrapped around the Demon's Spear and the Annihilation Hammer, Eugene's sword force became so large that the fierce flame-like force couldn't become any bigger. Under Eugene's control, his force was condensed. When Eugene poured his mana to the limit, his mana seeped into the weapons little by little, but this wasn't surprising. For the past 15 days he had repeatedly done this whenever his mana was replenished. This forest was full of mana. The World Tree seedlings were here and the ley line was close by. Even if Eugene used his mana to the brink of depletion, the efficient white flame formula helped Eugene recover his mana in less than half a day. I think I'm almost there. Just when Eugene felt an ache from his cores that were being depleted. Crack. He could hear different sounds from the Demon's Spear and the Annihilation Hammer. The two weapons were originally black, but they started to turn white within the flames of the white flame formula. Small cracks spread on the surface of the weapons immediately after the weapons changed their colors. Crack. Crack. The lightning flame in Eugene's mana seeped in through the weapon's cracks. That wasn't it. No matter how many times Eugene had called them previously, the World Tree's spirits never approached Eugene. But those fog-like beings now came up to Eugene as if being attracted to him like magnets. As the lightning flame sparked, the World Tree's spirits blended themselves into the flame, becoming a part of Eugene's mana. Then again Eugene's mana seeped into the cracks of the Demon's Spear and the Annihilation Hammer. Eugene watched everything as his consciousness clouded. Should I stop? Eugene pondered. Although the World Tree's spirit had been added to his mana, the total amount of Eugene's mana didn't significantly increase. His cores were already on the brink of getting depleted. If Eugene continued to infuse his mana into these two weapons, he might pass out from exhaustion or acquire a chronic injury in his cores. I'm not going to be fucked, Boom. The Demon's Spear and the Annihilation Hammer exploded. The explosions were sudden, but Eugene wasn't flustered or let go of the two weapons as he hadn't missed the telltale signs of those weapons' mana flows exploding after they were distorted. Shit. Eugene looked at his arms, crumpling up his face. Thankfully, his bones and muscles weren't injured, but his skin was reddened and stung as if Eugene had acquired a slight burn. Eugene's ring flame and the lightning flame disappeared as the explosions subsided. However, they weren't technically gone. The cracks on the weapons were now filled up. The lightning flame inside Eugene's mana was added to the Demon's Spear and the Annihilation Hammer, becoming one with the weapons. To put it shortly, the Demon's Spear and the Annihilation Hammer were connected to Eugene. Grinning, Eugene held up the Demon's Spear and the Annihilation Hammer. He began to utilize his mana as he kept on grinning. PCCZ. Even with little mana he could form sword force around the two weapons. With a big smile, Eugene looked at the lightning flame as it sparked around the weapons. No, he shouldn't be satisfied already. I will first start with the Annihilation Hammer, Eugene thought. After putting down the Demon's Spear, Eugene held up the Annihilation Hammer with both hands. He first looked around to decide where he was going to swing it. Then, after choosing a suitable location, Eugene swung the hammer downward. Crack. The strong air current created by the hammer overwhelmed the nearby area. Eugene had done it. Of course, his Annihilation Hammer couldn't be compared to the Demon King's or Yuet's. Still, Eugene had successfully used the Annihilation Hammer's ability without using demonic energy. He was a bit dizzy though. Although he had expected it, Eugene had to use a lot of his mana to use the Annihilation Hammer's ability. It's not burdensome. I can spare this much mana. He also had to take into account that he didn't have much mana left in his cores. The power of his Annihilation Hammer had also weakened, but Eugene could still use the hammer in combat. It will become stronger over time. Next, Eugene picked up the Demon Spear. He calculated the coordinates to make the thorns rise, then thrust the spear into the ground, replicating the successful activation of the Annihilation Hammer's attack. This time, thorns rose up from the ground at the exact coordinates calculated by Eugene. However, the radius of the forest was smaller than Dominic's, and the arrangement of the thorns was also bad. However, Eugene wasn't disappointed. Since the lightning flame had been blended into the Demon Spear and the Annihilation Hammer, their powers would keep growing significantly as he became stronger. Eugene was about to put those two weapons inside the cloak, but he had to stop. When the weapons were halfway inside the cloak, Eugene could feel that someone was fervently watching him. The fervor in the person's eyes intensified when Eugene ignored them and put the weapons in. Unable to understand what was going on, Eugene pulled out the weapons a little bit, and the fervor in the gaze subsided slightly. "Why are you staring at me like that?" Eugene turned around, holding back his sighs. From behind a faraway tree, Carmen Lionheart stuck out her head. She was gloomily watching Eugene with squinted eyes. With a sour face, Eugene tilted his head in confusion. You are not suddenly going to reprimand me for owning the Demon Spear and the Annihilation Hammer, right?" He had told Carmen in advance about his owning the two weapons. Eugene had to tame the weapons in the forest, but it was impossible to fool Carmen's eyes. Carmen was grateful that Eugene had sorted out the incident at Black Lion Castle, and she had also checked that there wasn't a single trace of demonic energy on both weapons. Therefore, she readily agreed to Eugene's ownership of these two weapons. But why was she looking at him like that? Unable to understand her intention, Eugene just blinked. Carmen walked out from behind the tree, clearing her throat. "I heard an explosion." Well, that was because of me. I felt a surprisingly immense amount of mana. That was also. You have just used pressure with the Annihilation Hammer and Spear Forest with the Demon Spear, right? I told you before, I'm going to tame them so I can use. Before Eugene could finish, Carmen held out her right arm sideways. Due to her sudden movement, Eugene took a step back in surprise. To let Eugene see what she was doing, Carmen revealed the thing in her right hand, a silver pocket watch. "Form change," Carmen spoke quietly. Click. Eugene could hear a low machine sound inside the pocket watch. When it opened, the clock's hands turned and its lids split apart. Unable to say anything, Eugene just watched the whole thing happen. It wasn't an exaggeration to say the watch was the essence of cutting-edge alchemical technologies. The pocket watch, which was as small as Carmen's palm, split into pieces and extended itself, wrapping around Carmen's right arm. "This is my Heaven Genocide's destiny form." Eugene silently listened to Carmen's explanation. "If anyone sees this arm, someone has to die." "Do I have to die?" Eugene asked. "Since I have no intention of dying, you will if we begin to play with fate," Carmen said as she clenched her fists. Her sharp fingers were covered in silver metal. "Fweek. But I don't fight to the death with my family," she continued. "Is that so?" Eugene half-heartedly said. "It's a good thing for both of us. We won't be adding another tragedy to the Lionheart family." "Fweek." Carmen continued to move her fingers. Since Eugene wasn't sure what to say, he just looked at the Heaven Genocide in its destiny form wrapped around Carmen's right arm. Eugene could feel the excitement rising deep inside when he looked at the metal gauntlet. "What do you think?" Carmen asked suddenly. "Pardon? I'm talking about my Heaven Genocide in destiny form." "It's cool," Eugene answered half-heartedly again. "I haven't shown you. No, I can't show you my Destiny Breaker. But to maximize Destiny Breaker's power, I have to use it in destiny form." "Is that so?" "The Heaven Genocide has many forms aside from the destiny form. Don't you want to see them?" "I'm good. I think we can have a good fight if I use my Heaven Genocide in blaster form and you use pressure with the Annihilation Hammer." "Well, we can't actually have a battle though." Carmen lifted her arm sideways, looking genuinely disappointed. Click. When Eugene heard the machine noise again, The Heaven Genocide changed its form to be the pocket watch again. So, what do you think? Carmen asked again. Didn't you ask me that before? I felt your previous answer wasn't genuine. I really think it's cool, Eugene repeated. Do you want to have this? Nope. It's understandable if you want to have this. This artifact is really cool, but I'm not going to lend it to you. I'm also not going to tell you how I got my hands on it or who made it. Right. Aren't you curious? Carmen asked with a proud look. Judging from how she kept glancing at Eugene with her chest puffed out and shrugged, it seemed she desperately wanted to brag. I'm curious. Eugene obliged unenthusiastically. I found the Heaven Genocide through a coincidental encounter. No, a miracle. Wow, it's already been decades since I found it. I went through a magical experience when I was young. That's all I can tell you, Carmen spoke with a dazed look. Can't you just tell the story to the end if you are going to tell me anyway? I can't. I can't break the promise since promises are important. Click. After closing the lid of the pocket watch, Carmen put it into her inner pocket. Your new weapons made the enthusiasm inside me spark. Don't worry. I'm used to feeling enthusiastic in this way and I can always control it. Eugene wasn't worried about that from the start. However, be careful not to explode anything else. While I was running here, I saw a couple of elves collapse on the ground. Sir Signard was also about to come running here, thinking the village was under attack. So I stopped him, Carmen warned Eugene. Thank you, Eugene bitterly answered. Is your injured arm okay? It just stings a little now. I will recover by tomorrow, even without any treatment. You're being sloppy. Small injuries should also be treated fully. Besides, the Lionheart family is a warrior family. We have all kinds of healing potions, so don't hesitate to use any kind of medicine to heal your injury. Yes, I understand. Let's return. Carmen turned back. As if it was natural for her to do so, she led the way as she and Eugene got out of the forest. Since Eugene had finished taming the demon's spear and the annihilation hammer, he had no reason to stay in the forest any longer. The demon's spear and the annihilation hammer no longer resemble their original form. Do we still have to call them by those names? Yeah. Pardon. Since they don't hold demonic energy anymore, we can't call them Demon King's weapons now. Then would there be any reason to call them by those names? I think it's better to use the same name since it would be confusing. What do you think of Gaia Crasher and Longinus? Then are they now Gaia Crasher Jigalath and Longinus Luentos? The question crossed Eugene's mind. I like their original names. Eugene swiftly shook his head. The owners have the right to name their weapons, so I will just make suggestions. I won't violate your rights. Does she think the names Gaia Crasher and Longinus are better? Really? Eugene seriously wondered. Master Eugene. Right before Carmen and Eugene exited the forest, they met Nerissa, sitting down on the floor and Lavera helping Nerissa stand up. When Carmen and Eugene saw the two elves, Carmen dramatically signaled Eugene with her eyes as she crossed her arms. Nerissa was the elf who collapsed to the ground, surprised by the sound of the explosions. Did Carmen come this way on purpose to show Eugene what happened after the explosions? Eugene felt like he would never be able to understand what went on inside Carmen Lionheart's head. I was going to find you, but I happened to run into you first. Lavera spoke brightly with a nonchalant look. What's up? Eugene asked. Nerissa and Lavera were currently working as apprentice maids in the annex. Their shifts must be over already, but they were still wearing their Lionheart maid's uniform. I have come to ask permission to go out tomorrow, sir, Lavera calmly explained. Go out. Yes, tomorrow happens to be my day off, Lavera continued as she brushed the dirt off Nerissa's skirt. Every time Lavera brushed Nerissa's skirt, her body wobbled. It seemed Nerissa hadn't adjusted to her new prosthetic leg yet. Can I ask why you are going out? Eugene asked. I have to receive my prosthetic eye, Nerissa spoke, pointing to her left eye patch. Where are you going? I'm going to downtown Ceres. Have you ever been there? No, sir. Elves attracted people's attention. Of course, the capital of the Kiel Empire was safe, but there was always that what if. Therefore, Eugene had previously set a ground rule. The elves had to be accompanied by at least one knight from the main house when they went out. Do you want any specific knight to guard you? No, sir, Lavera dryly answered, but Nerissa kept poking Lavera's waist, glancing at Eugene. No matter how many times Nerissa poked Lavera, her expression remained the same. Then I will go with you, Eugene casually said. Would that be okay? Lavera asked. Nerissa's eyes lost focus for a moment. She didn't expect Eugene to offer to be Lavera's guard. Me too. You don't have a day off tomorrow, Nerissa, Lavera said coldly. If I just ask somebody to cover my shift. Nerissa suggested tentatively. Head servant Nina doesn't like servants changing their shifts for personal reasons. Lavera calmly reminded Nerissa, so she couldn't speak any further. What time shall we meet tomorrow? Eugene asked. Any time will be fine with me, Nerissa answered. Then shall we go at around noon? I also haven't gone out to downtown Ceres yet, but Mare knows many good restaurants. This was because Ancilla and Gerhard brought Mare out to tour the city whenever they could. Yes, noon will be good. Lavera calmly bowed her head. Chapter 158. The Capital, 2. The Lionheart family's main estate was located on the outskirts of the capital Ceres. It took hours to go downtown in a carriage. If Lavera had asked one of the Lionheart knights to accompany her, she would have used a carriage. But with Eugene accompanying her, things were different. After all, why would they bother to use a carriage when they had a warp gate they could employ? The warp gate in the main estate wasn't usually activated other than for significant occasions. However, Eugene was currently respected enough to warrant the use of the warp gate for personal reasons. When you are talking about a prosthetic eye, are you talking about a specially made artifact? Mare actively asked. Unlike usual, Mare wasn't in the cloak. Ever since she had come to the main estate, she had gone out to the capital's downtown several times, but she had never gone out with Eugene. Maybe because of that, Ancilla had made considerable efforts to dress up Mare from head to toe since daybreak. I have heard of prosthetic eyes that can be directly connected to people's optic nerves, but I heard they are costly, Lavera spoke as she stroked her right eye patch. 1. Instead of her maid uniform, she was wearing a formal dress today. Money shouldn't be a problem. You should buy it if you need it. It will be uncomfortable to live without an eye, Eugene said matter-of-factly. As an apprentice maid, I'm receiving more salary than I deserve, but... Of course you can't afford it with your salary. Can't I just buy it for you? Eugene tilted his head as if saying something obvious. I appreciate your gesture, but I'm fine, sir. You don't have to refuse. I can't use such prosthetic eyes, Lavera explained, lifting her eye patch slightly and exposing burnt cut marks around her eye. The inside of my eye was seared with a hot iron, so I will never be able to see with my left eye, no matter how expensive of a prosthetic eye I use. Mare trembled after she saw Lavera's wound inside her eye patch. Then, won't it look good if you use a prosthetic eye made from a jewel? Won't it be good if you just don't say anything? Eugene advised. Mare refuted, I am being considerate of Miss Lavera in my own way. Were you being considerate when you suggested a one-eyed elf to set a jewel in her eye? I'm in despair at your lack of humanity to call the one-eyed elf as the one-eyed elf, Sir Eugene. I didn't say anything wrong. A very inconsiderate conversation was being exchanged back and forth between Eugene and Mare. Meanwhile, unable to say anything, Lavera, the subject of their conversation, just stayed quiet. Of course, she knew they were being considerate in their own ways while saying such stuff. However, what was she supposed to say when they talked about things like one eye or jewel eye? I just like ordinary prosthetic eyes. Lavera wasn't going to interfere, but she felt their conversation would never finish if she didn't. There are prosthetic eyes that can be used for self-defense. Mare beamed. Do they shoot out death rays or something? Eugene asked. Such eyes might exist. I have seen it before, Eugene spoke without thinking much, but then he became conscious of Lavera's presence and cleared his throat before continuing. When I went to Nahama Desert, some of the assassins and sand shamans used prosthetic eyes engraved with magic formulas. That's the kind of prosthetic eye I was talking about. Mare clapped as she chimed in. It wasn't hard to see people who were missing a limb or had an arrow stuck in their eyes 300 years ago. Therefore, naturally, some crazy bastards used specially made artifacts to make up for their missing body parts. However, those specially made artifacts had limits in the end. No matter how much ingenuity and best efforts the talented artisans, alchemists, and wizards used in trying to make prosthetic eyes with rare magic minerals, artificially created prosthetic eyes were ultimately overwhelmingly inferior to demonies. Of course, demonies were also very rare. They could only be found among demon folks, but not every demon folk had them. Only a select few high-ranking demon folks had demonies with ridiculous abilities. Those demonies were a symbol of power within the pure-blood demon folks. It was an inheritance that was passed down and consistently developed for generations and generations within the pure-blood demon folk families. I have heard that the Queen of Night Demons has the demon eye of fantasy. Is that true? Mare asked Eugene in her mind. Yes, but her demon eye doesn't have magnificent powers, unlike its name. According to the records, the Queen of Night Demons had single-handedly killed 30,000 Turas elite forces. Norgiabella wasn't the only high-ranking demon folk who had the power to do so at the time. She even drowned 30,000 men in a plane that didn't have a single drop of water. From what I read, the plane turned to a sea when her eye shone, and sea waves rushed over the armies. It's true that 30,000 people drowned, but the plane didn't turn into a sea. What's the difference? Norgiabella's demon, doesn't turn illusion into reality. She just makes others feel that way. Those 30,000 men had seen sea waves and drowned, but weren't actually buried at sea. So she shows powerful illusions, am I right? Yeah, Norgiabella's demon eye is called the demon eye of fantasy because she and the demon eye matched fantastically well, more like disgustingly well. Norgiabella was the queen of night demons. Among the numerous night demons, she was the most powerful. As such, she reigned over them. The dreams created by her were so exquisite that they were hard to distinguish from reality. She could interfere and break human minds in seconds, making her power incomparable to other demons. Her demon eye of fantasy could make others dream even when awake. When one was caught by her demon eye, their reality changed into dreams. You said her demon eye doesn't have magnificent powers, but when I listen to your story, I feel like the demon king that the queen serves can fight with God. I'm telling you, it's not like that. She can bust her ass, but in the end all she does is make illusions, not change reality. If you continue to get a grip on yourself, she can't delude you. To be honest, I had more trouble dealing with Gavid Lindman's demon eye of divine glory and Iris' demon eye of darkness, rather than Norgiabella's demon eye of fantasy. Norgiabella had given the heroes' party so much trouble in Helmuth, but no one in Eugene's party fainted or went out of their minds. Doesn't that just mean you are the best in the end? I wasn't the only one who was best. Anise had maintained her holy barrier, and Sienna had blocked all kinds of mental interference around the clock. That's why we didn't get deluded. Lady Sienna is indeed the best. Mare sheepishly smiled as she nodded. While they conversed with their minds, Lavera naturally became alienated, but she didn't mind much and only focused on walking. She inevitably got used to being alienated. The Kiel Empire's capital, Ceres, was the fanciest city Lavera had ever been to. The city was well managed. The roads were smoothly paved, the pedestrians used different roads from carriages, guards were deployed every few blocks, and people in the streets were dressed in fine clothes and were very relaxed. It was an everyday scene in this place. Lavera and Eugene were walking in the central area of Ceres. Even if commoners worked for their entire lives, they could never own even a small room in this area. Lavera had lived in Nahama in the past. Her owner was a merchant who had accumulated a fortune through trading. However, her owner didn't live a morally correct life. Due to its harsh environment, the gap between the rich and the poor was blatantly revealed in Nahama. Her owner enjoyed various pleasures in his large mansion, but outside his mansion, many old houses couldn't even shield people from the desert's cold night. Her owner sometimes put a leash on Lavera and took a walk around the city. It was an ordinary event in Nahama. Nobles and wealthy merchants in Nahama often showed off their rare pets. And Lavera happened to be the rarest of them all, an elf. She was a great pet who made her owner puff out his chest with pride. As the owners' contests went on, the poor people talked in whispers and looked at Lavera with heinous intentions mixed with jealousy, hostility, and greed. She was used to people looking at her that way. When her naughty, mischievous owner got bored during their stroll, he would furtively let go of Lavera's leash and make her walk on her own. Every time he did that, Lavera walked, looking around carefully, hunching her shoulders as much as she could. After she had spent a while like that, her owner would disappear and people with wicked intentions would immediately approach Lavera. Then Lavera had to run and hide from them, but in the end she always got caught. There was nothing Lavera could do but scream. and as she screamed, her owner's warriors would show up and save her. The stroll was never fun for Lavera, but when she thought of what would happen afterward, she preferred the stroll. She shouldn't feel pain in her left eye anymore, but somehow her left eye ached. Horrible memories came flooding back at her in waves, making her subconsciously flinch, but she soon caught her breath after looking around her peaceful surroundings. The city was different from the city in Nahama. Although people might be staring at her, they didn't look at her with heinous intentions. Lavera knew why. She was wearing a cloak that had the Lionheart family's symbol on the back as she walked with Eugene and Mare. "What's wrong?" Eugene asked as he felt Lavera lose her footing. "An old memory crossed my mind," Lavera hesitantly answered. "I'm pretty sure it's not a good memory. Don't waste your time thinking about the past. Think about the lunch we are going to have instead." Eugene looked outside the window. "What are we having?" Lavera asked with a faint smile on her face. "We are going to a restaurant that Sir Gerhard regularly visits. Their veal course meal is really good." Mare spoke with sparkling eyes. She had recommended the restaurant to Eugene and Lavera, and Ancilla had personally made a reservation for them. The restaurant was so famous that people had to make reservations a week in advance to be able to at least sit in the corner of the restaurant. However, this morning, the second mistress of the Lionheart family reserved the window seat with a great view using family influence. "To be honest, I think dinners in the main estate are better," Eugene grumbled. The restaurant waiters continuously served them fancy dishes. The food was as good as it looked, but it wasn't as good as the dishes served in the Lionheart's main estate. "You eat very well for someone who says such stuff." Mare sneered. "Why would I leave any food on my plate when I have come this far to eat? I'm not saying the food is bad. If you don't like it, don't eat more. Give it to Miss Lavera or me. Why would I give my leftovers to someone else? I will just order one more." Eugene grumbled again as he cut his big steak. Sitting across from Eugene, Lavera glanced forward as she cut her steak into little pieces. Although Eugene had complained as if he wasn't going to give Mare his steak, he was putting the pieces he had just cut on Mare's plate. Beaming, Mare naturally ate the big steak pieces one by one. "You two look like a father and daughter," Lavera quietly commented. "Are you crazy?" Eugene swiftly turned to Lavera in shock. "I actually think so too, Miss Lavera." Mare grinned. Eugene and Mare's reactions were the polar opposite of each other. Still beaming, Mare put one piece of her steak on Lavera's plate. "I have never even gotten married before. Why would you treat me as somebody's dad?" Eugene spoke, annoyed. "Do you have a plan to get married, Master Eugene?" Lavera asked as she chewed on the steak piece from Mare. "Nope. There is a rumor going around among servants. You and White Tower Master share a special bond." Lavera trailed off. "Are you really crazy? Me? With White Tower Master? With the Melkith Al-Haya? Kaiwaya?" Melkitha's weird scream came to Eugene's mind, making him frown. Isn't there a big age gap between us?" "I have just turned 20 this year," Eugene said haltingly. "Hee hee." Mare quietly chuckled beside Eugene. Scowling at Mare, Eugene continued, "White Tower Master is almost 70 now. If she had gotten married early, she would have a grandson my age. Is a 50-year gap a lot?" Lavera innocently asked. "Yeah, you are an elf," Eugene groaned. "I am aware White Tower Master is old from a human perspective, but won't she live longer than ordinary humans as an archwizard? Among long-living beings, the age of 70 is considered pretty young. Then I must be a baby in your eyes. Not only does White Tower Master look young, but she also has a pure, young mind." Lavera continued her insight on Melkith. "It weirdly sounds like a compliment even though it means she can't act her age. Do you not want an older partner when you get married?" Lavera asked, prompting Mare to look at Eugene with sparkling eyes. "Well, maybe it is better if she is older than me, rather than being too young. Are you considering another woman to be your partner besides White Tower Master? You are weirdly very inquisitive about my marriage today. Did you secretly receive orders from my father or Nina?" Without answering, Lavera stayed quiet. Shaking his head, Eugene clicked his tongue. "Father is being silly. It hasn't been long since I became an adult, so why is he worried about my marriage already? Lady Ancilla is also worrying about marriage. She wants Sir Cyan to marry a princess from another kingdom. Do you like princesses too, Sir Eugene?" Mare interrupted. With a disgusted face, Eugene answered, "What? Princess? I don't have any plans to get married. Still, you might get married if the person is older, on the same wavelength as you, and is your close friend, right? Mare grinned, imagining the future where her name was Mare Lionheart instead of Mare Meridian. Eugene had never imagined getting married. Why would he think about getting married when he had a ton of stuff to do right now? But, well... Eugene groaned. Since he had died in his past life without having any children, he did want to get married and have many children. However, he was going to think about it after he finished the stuff that he hadn't been able to complete in his past life. Although it would be difficult to kill all demon folks, he wanted to kill the Demon King of Incarceration and the Demon King of Destruction. Weirdly, the women whom Eugene was acquainted with came to his mind: Sienna Meridian, Seal Lionheart, Christina Rogerus, and Melkith Elhaya. Aside from those 4 women, there were several other women whom Eugene knew, but those 4 were the ones with whom he had gotten close. Getting married to Sienna? Why would he get married to that violent girl? She always cursed at him whenever Hamel did something. The times when Sienna called him son of a bitch and motherfucker annoyedly flashed through Eugene's mind. So why would he meet, eat, and wake up with her every day? Wait, hadn't we already done that in Helmuth? Eugene thought. Hamel, you have truly come back to me. Inside the world tree, Sienna had hugged Eugene, smiling with teary eyes. When that moment came to Eugene's mind, he couldn't continue to think about Sienna anymore. Then how about Seal? Wasn't she still a kid? Were they able to get married in the first place? Well, it was possible since they were siblings who had totally different parents. Although Eugene was currently Gilead's adopted son, Gilead would be more than willing to annul Eugene's adoption for the sake of marriage. In fact, Gilead would prefer to be called father-in-law rather than uncle. Well, I think Lady Ancilla will want it too. It wasn't a bad deal for the Lionheart family, but Eugene really couldn't imagine being married to Seal. There was also Christina Rogerus, the saint of the Holy Empire. She looked like a niece and was connected to a niece, who became an angel for some reason. However, getting married to the saint was absolutely absurd. The Church of Light didn't force its priests to remain single, but nuns and monks had to. The restriction also applied to the saint. Eugene really couldn't imagine Christina as his wife, and Christina also would have to be half out of her mind to get married to Eugene. Despite all that, Christina had to renounce the Church of Light if Eugene and Christina were to get married. After that, things would get really bothersome and complicated. Eugene had met the Inquisitors at Black Lion Castle, but they were egoists, self-righteous, and know-it-alls. They would definitely hunt Christina after she renounced the church, calling her heretic and fallen. Lady Melkith is... Kaya. Kia. Eugene stopped thinking. Besides, what was the point of imagining all this? It wasn't like anything like that had happened in reality. I have requested the shop in Alcard Street to make my prosthetic eye. The street is at the west of Ceres. Lavera calmly explained, pulling Eugene back to reality. The street was close to the palace but far from the central district where all the rich people lived. Still, the International Warp Gate was located nearby, making it a busy street for the many tourists visiting the Kiel Empire. This street was also home to the adventurers and mercenary guilds. Since they had to travel a lot to do their quests like killing monsters and adventuring in dungeons, it was more convenient to have an International Warp Gate close by. With many people in those lines of work frequenting this street, various unique shops that couldn't be found in the central district were located here. Shops favored by mercenaries and adventurers rather than knights or nobles. There were weapon shops that sold functional and practical weapons rather than decorative ones, and alchemists who roamed the streets, quietly selling effective but suspicious-looking potions. Eugene's group arrived at Alcard Street through the Warp Gate. The street looked uniquely different from the central district where Eugene's group had just passed through. In fact, this was the toughest street in the capital series. I have never come here before. Mare looked around, feeling her heart pounding with excitement. The street wasn't dangerous. Guards regularly patrolled the street too, but they usually didn't meddle with fights among adventurers or mercenaries from the guilds. Rather than mediating, solving, and arresting them one by one, the guards knew that it was easier to let the guild members fight among themselves. There are so many annoying people. Although he hadn't bothered to look around, Eugene could sense people looking at his group from every direction. Eugene's group did stand out, attracting attention. A one-eyed elf, a gray-haired man with golden eyes, wearing a Lionheart uniform, and a purple-haired girl in her cute formal dress. You must be really annoyed too since people always stare at you for being an elf. They don't come and pick a quarrel, do they? Eugene asked Lavera. I have come to this street for the second time, but nothing of the sort has happened so far. Lavera shook her head. Which knight did you go out with last time? Sir Neen from the White Lion Knights guarded me. Stuff like this didn't happen last time because that guy is big and looks intimidating. It is true that the people in this street are belligerent, but they wouldn't think lightly of the Lionhearts and come close. Lavera stopped speaking as she turned her head. A freckled man with bushy hair was furtively approaching their group, smiling servilely. Are you Sir Eugene Lionheart? The man asked. He was alone. Since Eugene just looked at him without saying anything, the man cleared his throat as he continued. My name is Tepper. I am working as a reporter at Scarth newspaper. Which newspaper is that? Eugene asked Mare. It is the shitty newspaper that publishes exaggerated tabloid gossip. Tepper groaned. It is more like a fiction novel publisher than a newspaper publisher. What was the article that I read? Oh right. The mysterious serial killer roams the capital at dawn. But it turns out he is Marquis X's illegitimate son. Scarth is doing an exclusive interview with him. It scribbles this kind of stuff. Mare spoke. Is there a serial killer roaming around the capital at dawn? Eugene tilted his head in confusion. No, there isn't. I told you. It publishes fiction novels, not newspapers. Mare's criticism had Tepper frowning noticeably. Maintaining his composure with difficulty, Tepper asked, Could you give me a moment of your time? I don't do interviews, Eugene answered shortly. Please, it won't take long. I heard that the Lionheart family has recently experienced a humiliating and embarrassing problem. You've got some guts. Are you saying that even though you know my surname is Lionheart? Snorting, Eugene waved his hand. Don't bullshit me and get lost. You can keep fucking around if you want to write your articles with a pen in your mouth for the rest of your life. As if he hadn't expected a young noble from a prestigious family to say such stuff, Tepper blinked, unable to say anything. Get lost, Eugene told Tepper twice already. Tepper hesitated, but he stayed put. Clicking his tongue, Eugene flicked his finger in Tepper's direction. Pop. With just a single finger, Eugene struck the middle of Tepper's forehead. Screaming, Tepper collapsed on the floor. Some people just don't listen. Oh, you can write this as your article, by the way. Eugene Lionheart from the Lionheart Main family is an asshole and violent like a rabid dog. If people fucked around me, they might get their asses kicked. You got it, right? Ancilla was recently hellbent on oppressing the newspapers, so if Tepper really published an article like that, she would literally tear the Scarth newspaper apart and set an example for other newspapers. Are you already making sure you wouldn't receive any marriage offers? Mare grinned. Be quiet. I am right, aren't I? You are advertising that you have a serious problem with your personality, so other noble ladies and princesses wouldn't ask you to marry them, right? My personality is fine. Of course, I act rude to rude bastards. For nice words to come around, nice words need to go around. If Lady Sienna says nice words to you, will you say nice words back to Lady Sienna? Mare asked in her mind. That girl, she never said nice words. I know you, Hamel. Even though your reincarnation changed your body, replaced your face, and even gave you a new name, you're still the same Hamel I've always known. Why did you stop talking? It's hot today, Eugene grumbled, passing Tepper, who was still collapsed on the road. The spring breeze brushed against Eugene's hair. The breeze was still cold because winter wasn't over yet,